that REAP that he has to leave early for. So we'll do this first, and then we'll do agenda review second.
Okay. Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. So I have a whole lot to talk about this morning as things are kind of happening fast in Topeka. And I've got a lot of help in the room that I'm going to rely on this morning. So first thing that I want to talk about this morning is we received from Jason and also KAC some information on two, just a minute, let me get my stuff together here. Constitutional amendments, which is HCR 5025. And that is a change to the valuation of residential property to a 10-year rolling average to determine the fair market value. And then one that we talked about last year, which is Senate Concurrent Resolution 1611, which would amend Section 1, Article 11 of the Kansas Constitution to limit the increase in valuation on real property to 4% per year. So there is going to be a hearing next Tuesday, I believe, on this. And KAC is asking that we contact the House delegation to talk about which proposals we as a county prefer, as well as testifying in committee on these two proposals. So I have a copy of that, and I'm going to pass that out. And then I may lean on Lindsay as well as Mark Clark for information on this. So let me get this to you.
Tanya, can you clarify that HCR 5025, is that also a proposed constitutional amendment? Both are.
Yes,
okay.
They both are. Yes, thank you. So Lindsay, I don't know if you want to speak to this, or Mark, if you want to speak to this.
Both, please.
Mark is certainly, while he's walking up, the only things I want to point out is there are two concurrent resolutions. The 1611 that does the 4% cap would be effective as of 1/1/25, but the 10-year average residential concurrent resolution 5025 wouldn't be effective until 1/1/26. So neither is desirable. Both are, I mean, just ridiculous, but I'll let Mark speak to why they're ridiculous.
Good morning, Mark Clark, County Appraiser. All the studies that we have looked at, and plus looking at this legislation, it's going to take massive increases in staff to accomplish the task that these proposals in order to bring these to fruition. Also, both of these have detrimental impacts to budgets, to services provided, to bonds outstanding, whether it's a general obligation, TIF, school bonds, TIF districts, etc. But when you're talking about HCR 5025, that focuses on residential. And there are other real property classifications, and especially commercial, somebody is going to file suit. Unconstitutional because it creates inequities between residential and commercial. It violates the uniform and equal clause in the Constitution, different treatment for different classes of property. The 10-year moving average does not meet the maintenance specifications when it comes to looking at, and the maintenance specifications are put out by PVD for physically inspecting each property every 6 years. This here says 10 years. That does not work. It's out of sync. You're going to have different timelines, and things are going to fall through the cracks. Things are not going to be data collected the way they should. And even data collection, it makes me wonder, what exactly are you going to allow, is the legislature going to allow us to do? This looks like sweeping changes, and there are things that PVD has not had a chance to look at, as far as putting guidelines, maintenance specifications, directives, and so forth together to even implement this. And they want to do this next year. That looks like a disaster. Mass appraisal system would, in my opinion, would be no more. The 10-year moving average would be calculated for each parcel. And when you're taking in, that would not allow you to take into consideration location, similar properties, age, size, etc. Equity and uniformity issues will arise quickly in this type of system. When it comes to appeals, what are they appealing? Are they going to appeal the value, or are they going to appeal how a calculation is made? It makes no sense. Breaking away from fair market value, once a state breaks away from fair market value, I haven't found one yet that goes back to it. That's pretty scary. When you're talking about adjustments for new parcels, it does mention that in the legislation. However, remember, this county has a major problem when it comes to multi-parcel situations in this county, and that will definitely cause some heartache for us and for the property owner. That is very, very concerning. When it comes to SCR 1611, the 4% cap, once again, you're affecting budget, services provided, bonds outstanding, TIF districts, all kinds of things. So when you're looking at these two proposals, you're saying, what is being capped? Is it an appraised value? Is it an assessed value? Is it a taxable appraised value? One of them says market value. One of them says appraised or all real property. I mean, it's very confusing. You don't want to cap the appraised value, because once you do that, I mean, there are certain things that start to happen, and some of those, think about FEMA and reimbursements. Once you break that and you say, all right, the official appraised value is 4%. And cost of construction is a lot higher than that, and somebody has totally wiped out the property, I mean, they're going to get that 4%, and that's what they're getting. Also, why try to solve an issue? It doesn't solve the issue trying to be solved.
Yeah.
Even the thing that we're talking about right now, even with commissioners in this room, is people are looking for relief. My email is flooded. My phone is flooded. I know that all of your emails and phones are flooded, but we are following the law. So if you look at these proposals and they're being sold as, well, this is a panacea and this is what's going to happen, it doesn't fix the problem, because it doesn't give the homeowner the relief that they think they're going to get. And so when you start doing this sort of thing, it really creates a topsy-turvy effect. Once again, breaking away from fair market value is not smart. If you're going to cap something, cap the assessed. That is what mill levies use and generate tax and so forth. Don't mess with the appraised. Also, when you talk about SCR 1611, it creates a deferred maintenance issue. In other words, you're aging the housing stock. People are less likely to make improvements to their property or maintain their property because they're afraid that, the most hated man in Sedgwick County is going to make sure that, once they make an improvement, I'm going to pick that up. Well, I am going to pick that up because the legislation says I can do that. However, I think that it's important that we take those things into consideration. We're already talking about an impact on the supply of housing, but now we're talking about the housing that exists is becoming older, and what's creating that issue would be the legislation, and that isn't right.
Mark, do you mind if we ask a couple questions real quick on some of the things you just said?
That's fine.
I would agree that I think that they're trying to attack and make adjustments to property taxes is what is the fear that is driving some of this legislation. I also agree that it's not the appraised values we should be addressing. It's the easy way is the assessed value. So I got two questions. Number one, where are they getting the 10-year rolling average? Is there another state that it does this that we can glean from the impact or?
There are some that have varying, and I do have a study that I put my hands on yesterday that actually was provided to me through the Lincoln Land Institute. And they do various things across the country. There's about 19, 20 states that do various things. The 10-year moving average came from Representative Adam Smith, and basically he's looking at the 8-year moving average for ag use. And, you know, when you start looking at that, and not to pick on Commissioner Dennis, but, you know, he has for a number of years. Mark, when are these high commodity prices start rolling off? Well, we got to have some relief. Well, I mean, you're going to have the same sort of thing here, except it's 10 years. And, you know, and I just don't see that working.
Okay. Is a CR 1611, remind me, that limited valuation, is that appraised or assessed valuation, Justin, that they're wanting to limit? Do we know?
Interesting, because at one time it said taxable, appraised, or assessed. And now it seems to be referring to market value. And when I think of market value, I'm thinking of appraised. I want them to be clear in their language, and clearly they're not.
Okay. Do you have some heartburn, Lindsay? I know you would have heartburn if they attack the 4% assessed value, put a cap on the assessed value at 4%. That gives us heartburn because there's a budgetary complications, potential budgetary.
But any cap gives me heartburn.
Okay.
But at the same time, leave the appraised alone.
Okay.
But I don't like a 4% assessed cap.
Okay.
I know those are the questions. Tanya, what's the asker? Is there a chance to testify or and that's where the commission has to get to at the end after all questions are answered. A strategic approach, Mark threw a lot of stuff out there. We need to put a cohesive testimony together, or send people up, or at least send written. So Commissioner Howell, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Couple of quick questions. Thank you. You said that the legislature was talking about 8 years average for ag. Isn't ag land basically average over 6 years already?
Well, the ag use is an 8-year moving average.
It is right now. And they want to change that to a 10, or
they want to change it. It would be HCR 5025 for the residential only would be a 10-year moving average.
But right now ag is already has a rolling average already.
Yes.
Okay. For them to mess with the assessed value, as you just suggested a minute ago, rather than tinkering with the appraised value, if they tinker with the assessed value, that's still a constitutional amendment because those rates are in Constitution.
That is correct.
And I know that Vic Miller has a proposal to change assessed value for housing from 11.5 to 9, I think is his last proposal. All that does is just shift who pays. It doesn't change the dollars that go to government. It just simply shifts who's paying for that. So really all of these proposals, we're talking about primarily the fairness of taxation, the uniformity and equity aspects of taxation. We're not talking about the level of taxation.
Right. None
of these proposals actually get to the issue of level. They only get to the issue is it fair? Well, I have some things I would say about that. I think that if everyone's on the same market value, if let's say everybody was appraised at 90% value, is it equitable and fair? Of course it is. And that is a trick question. If everybody's appraised at 110% value, is it equitable and fair? It is. It's equitable and fair. Now, if someone's at 90% and someone else is 110%, that's not equitable and fair. We're trying to get that out of the system, right? It's when people are off, when people are appraised differently in different, different reference points, if you will, then someone's paying more than they should pay and someone's paying less than they should pay. That's not equitable and fair. So we're trying to get that out of the system. All these proposals are not solving that problem.
Right.
I mean, I think that's kind of missing the entire point here. In fact, they're doing nothing to limit what we need to run government. We're gonna pass a budget that runs government. I think we have to do that. I don't know. I just thank you for that. I have a lot of other comments I'd make, but I just think that these are all misguided. The only thing I'd say is 50-25 at least it's not tinkering with a artificial cap on appraisals. It is talking about a method that applies to all property. That's slightly better, but also you did make a comment about how dilapidated properties would result from 1611.
Actually,
And it's actually in both, because at the top of page 2 on HCR 5025, they get dinged if they pull a permit.
Right.
Same problem.
but I would say, and talking to my fellow county appraisers, and I tend to agree, the cap would be better than the moving average, because the moving average, the only thing you're doing is manipulating that average. That's all you're doing, because you have basically done away with a mass appraisal system. You're not looking at, what's similar, location, et cetera, et cetera. With a 4% cap, you still are. And so it's ugly.
So Mark, let me say one more thing. So I have all the data from you from this year, and I really appreciate that, by the way. If you look at the 60% of properties that increased in value over last year, some of them are 4% and below already.
Mhm.
But for those that are above 4%, if you brought them down to 4%, and then you also average in those that had a no change in value or had a decline in value, your average of all properties together in that situation is about 3.5%. It's not 4. So really, in terms of, how that impacts us, it's not a 4% growth cap to the county government. It's actually something less than that.
I would say yes.
It is.
I think the only thing that could change that is the fact that this does contemplate, if we're looking at the 4% cap, it does contemplate those that have been changed by, it's at the bottom of page 1. Property includes new construction or improvements, class changes, property becomes disqualified from exemption. If it was first listed as escaped or omitted property, if the legal description changes, or if the title, so basically if there's a sale, then you're allowed to capture those changes. So that's why we have continued to use the 4%, because we are semi-optimistic that there would be enough of that to bring it back up to 4. But I agree with you, it's going to be really hard to know with any kind of certainty what's going to happen from year to year, even with a cap.
However, but you did say something very important several months ago. Propose something. It's best to have an alternative, and the alternative would be use the assessed value. Please do not let them mess up the appraised, because I really think we're heading into no man's land there, where things could get pretty crazy.
I don't understand what you mean by that. I mean, if you're talking about not using a percentage conversion from appraised to assessed, you're talking about something that says there is a conversion percentage, but if it exceeds some number, then we bring it down to 4% on the assessed.
I would say that in both of these proposals, that I would focus not on the appraised value, capping the appraised, I'd cap the assessed. If that is what I was going to do. I don't like capping, period.
So to that end, Mark, so let's say somebody has an appraised value listed on their property. What you're saying is the assessed value would now be computed based on last year's value times 4%, or 1.04, if it exceeds that. Otherwise, it would be whatever the appraised value is,
Right.
times 11.5% of its residential. And as long as it's less than 4%, it perfectly matches with that assessed value and that appraised value
Yes.
metric. Otherwise, we're inserting a cap at it after the calculation has run.
Yes. And there have been proposals out there that this isn't one of them, but it would not surprise me if they at the last minute put something up there that said all property will be 4%. And so
I would actually ask for one other change here. And I know this is something they don't want to talk about, but if this was in statute, if they make a mistake, they could fix it.
true.
And it doesn't require a vote of the people necessarily. And I love the vote of the people. But if you ask people to cut their taxes in half, do you want yes or no? They'll vote yes, of course. The question is, what do you do if it doesn't, if this doesn't work the way they think it's going to work?
Right.
What's their solution to that? They're rushing this thing so fast. and it's such a large impact on the future of the state of Kansas, that alone should give them pause.
Right.
But if they wanted to do this in statute, I would actually probably want to support them and say, let's figure out something that makes people happier by doing something in statute. I would love to throw my weight behind that and say, don't be foolish here and do something you can't fix later on.
I would agree with that. I mean, this is a constitutional amendment. And when I had the opportunity to speak to many of these representatives and senators at the legislative reception, I said, you'll be remembered for what you do. I said, if you go against fair market value, and this doesn't work, I said, most states, and I haven't found one yet, go back to fair market value. And you can just look at states and what they're doing legislatively. They hold sessions longer, trying to figure out better ways to correct the mistakes that they've already made. So I think that, it's an election year. The governor's saying that if you don't do something, I'm going to bring you back for a special session. PVD hasn't had an opportunity, even if this passes. I really feel bad for a property valuation division, because they're the ones who have to put together the rules and regs, the directives, et cetera, and they have no opportunity because they want to do this January 1. And look at how long it took to do reappraisal, and then to get all of the directives and the maintenance specifications together. I mean, I just see a mess coming.
Mark, will either one of these reduce people's property tax? The reason I ask that question is, if you cap it, or if you have a rolling average, no matter what, cost of government continues, cost of government keeps going up. So at the end, we have to look at how much the value is, and we set then the mill levy is what is going to drive what the cost to the taxpayer is.
Correct.
So will either one of these solve the underlying problem?
I do not see that happening.
So we're going through a lot of turmoil, trying to solve a problem, but neither of these does that. Now, at first blush, when I looked at this, you made a statement at the beginning on the rolling average that would be difficult, and it would have a problem with equity with commercial. But try and make me so that I understand, because we already do that with ag land, and so then you would say that there's an inequity between commercial and residential and ag. So I don't know how that you can justify saying that there's an equity issue when we're already doing it.
Well, I mean, the bottom line there is, for years, commercial and residential property owners have felt that farmers get very, very special treatment, and many of them resent it. At the same time, it is part of our how ag land will be handled is in statute. It's also constitutional. So, I mean, the bottom line is, when you start talking about creating inequities between residential and commercial, you've got somebody who is going to be valued on fair market value, and they're going to be using a mass appraisal system. And on the residential, the only thing you're going to be doing is moving a moving average. That is what you're doing. Of course, they say every 10 years, so you'll have to go out there and pick up stuff, and you're going to have to pick up new construction. But it does make it very different. It's a very different system.
I understand it could be more difficult, but we're already doing it with ag. So I don't know how that you can justify that there is inequity and there's not inequity in others. You're splitting hairs.
I think if I could, Mark,
Go ahead.
Jump in. So one of the things that I think is interesting to your point there is that if you look at the actual language of what's in the Constitution, it says land devoted to agricultural use, which shall be valued upon the basis of its agricultural income or agricultural productivity. So it's not really looking at the value of the property itself, the real estate. It's looking at what is it producing. I would think that from a commercial property and even a residential property perspective, it's valuing those in a very different way. And so I think that's why, from my perspective, I can see that equity argument makes sense because they're being approached in different ways, even under how we do it today.
Well, the 4% cap, I think, is untenable. It means that someone that buys a brand new house or buys a house that's 5 years old, anything in that vicinity, they're going to be assessed at the current market value. Anyone that stays in their house for a long period of time, their house is going to be way behind what the fair market value is. So there is a huge problem with uniform and equity with the 4% cap.
I would say there is.
I was kind of surprised that you were kind of leaning towards the 4% cap if we went to either one of these, because the 4% cap to me is the one that's the most dangerous as far as having huge inequities between homes that might be side by side.
I understand that. And I think that and your argument is good. And I would say correct. But for 50-25, I think it's even more dire.
Well, at the end of the day, we're going to have to take some kind of action on this because I think both of these are bad policy. If they're incorporated into the Constitution of the state of Kansas, then it's pretty set for the foreseeable future. And governments are going to have a heck of a time figuring out how that they're going to set budgets on either one of these.
Any other questions?
So what's our strategy? What are we going to do here?
What's the date of testimony on this?
Tuesday at 3:30.
But at minimum, a comprehensive written analysis saying why we're against these, and probably send people on. Mark, is PVD going to weigh in on this as an entity?
Let's put it this way, and this is something that is near and dear to me, and it really irks me. PVD is forced by the committees to testify in the neutral. They cannot testify for or against, and it is, if they have two things against, they better have two things for. So it's kind of crazy. Okay. I can tell you that KCAA, the Kansas County Appraisers Association, will be front and present in both person and in written testimony.
Okay. Well, if
And if I could just add, I apologize. If I could just add, when this first started being talked about a while ago, I had a meeting with the Realtors Association, and they're very concerned about this too. So I believe that they will more than likely be putting in some kind of testimony as well. But I'm very concerned. And Commissioner Dennis, you really hit on it. But the inequity piece and what this does, it's just unconstitutional. So I'm comfortable with whatever you guys want to put in there. But I do feel like it's definitely not accomplishing what they're trying to get to. And I don't know. I mean, it's so strange to me that this is the path they're going if the end goal that they want will not even remotely be accomplished with it. So whatever we need to do to put in our 2 cents, I'm happy to help.
And Chairman, and certainly the will of the board in terms of whether to opine on these proposed resolutions, the Constitution, and how to do so. One thing that in looking at the Constitution, how it's worded that sticks out on this is the way that it's worded is that it says the legislature shall provide for a uniform and equal basis of valuation. And then it sets numerous potential exceptions to that. Both of these resolutions would be exceptions to uniform and equal valuation. And so if those are concepts that the board favors or wishes to favor, I think one thing that could be pointed out is that this is an exception to that. I know there's a lot of frustration out there about how high property taxes get on valuations, and Mark's covered some of that, but I think the inequities could be the focus the board could look at on this, and that maybe this creates disparities that you would disfavor.
I would agree. I think that might be the most logical appeal. I think saying it's not the only frustration that we have and concern we have. We have concerns about what it does to local budgets and local capacity to perform public safety, public works, public health, all of these things. But I think the appeal has to be on both of those sides of the coin, is the fear of what it does for local and also the inequities piece. Would you agree, Commissioner Harris?
Yes, absolutely. I think that that's one of our best arguments, I believe, is that the underlying argument is taxes should be fair. And this actually makes them unfair. It's non-uniform, non-equal, which is another way to say unfair. So if you want taxes to be fair, this is going the wrong direction. It sounds good on the surface until you understand what's actually happening. I'm wondering, do we have someone that's going to be able to testify on this?
Somebody, we're having, what time's testimony on Tuesday, and are both of these happening at the same time? Correct. When written has to be in by tomorrow, then, or testimony written due tomorrow?
Typically, written testimony is due 24 hours before the hearing.
You're right, Monday.
And the only thing I might add is my understanding is that it would be better if elected officials are testifying.
I mean, we'll do what we can, but if they're not.
I agree. Honestly, I was going to make a recommendation that all 5 commissioners go up and have the commissioner testify and say you got 4 commissioners sitting behind him.
Actually, we can all sign up to speak. I mean, there's no reason why we can't all speak. So
This is significant enough change with a constitutional amendment that I think all of us need to be there.
you know, one thing that really is pushing us forward is there. Tom, I sent you a snapshot yesterday of what the state budget looks like this year. Did you see that? They are increasing their budget significantly this year. Again, I use the word again. They're increasing their budgets faster than we are. And I think we've been very good at protecting, and I use the word precious property tax dollars. Their presumption that we're wasteful of property tax dollars is ignorant and naive. And I know those are strong words, but that's what I mean to say. They don't know. And I think that the assumption that we're simply not doing a good job managing these precious property tax dollars is driving this. It's ignorance and it's naivety. Is that the right word? Right, we say that. If there's some way we can prove to them that we're not being wasteful, in fact, I would tell you if we have to, we're forced not to raise the mill levy and we're forced not to fund government, the very first things I like to start defunding is the state responsibilities, the things they force us to do. I'd start defunding those things first. I know they don't like that, but that's where we have to go. And at the end of the day, I don't think we have a lot of choice with what we have to do here. If our first choice is to raise the mill levy or defund, if you will, state services, that's okay. That's where we're going to go with this. And I'll support that. I think we need to, our testimony needs to be about what do we use property taxes for? You guys apparently don't know. And there, you know, it seems like you guys are aware of your own budget, but you have no idea how local government actually works. I speak as a former legislator. They don't know. They just don't know. They see a billboard that says get a vaccine. It makes them mad. But that's not property tax dollars. So if they understand where property tax dollars goes, and I've challenged people, hundreds of people in the last couple of years, tell me where to cut. I pledge my support to your idea of cut. I'll cut anything. Tell me what to cut. Anything. Let me show you what we spend money on. And no one has an idea. No one's, they sell that's your job. I said, well, okay, well, I'll start cutting some of this stuff. How about this? No, don't cut that. At the end of the day, when they start seeing what we spend money on, they don't really want us to cut spending on these things. They don't want it. They want us to provide these services. The legislature, frankly, needs to be informed of what we do with property tax dollars. Things cost money, and services are demanded by people. I don't know what we can do to convince the legislature, but this is misguided. They think we're wasting dollars because we're inefficient and just having, we just sit on piles of cash and spend money for circuses and things like that. It's just not true. If we really bust our hump and try to cut, $1 million out of the budget, it's going to be difficult to do that. So anyway, I would love to testify. Part of me says I'm going to be hard to not to attack them because I think, frankly, their budgets are out of control. And so anyway, I'd love to testify, but I can't. I might be able to rearrange my schedule, but right now I can't do it unless I do it by Zoom. I'll try to rearrange my schedule. I would love to be there if I can. So,
But I think we need to be polite, and when we talk to them, I don't want to attack them, okay? But I think we need to inform them. We need Lindsay's long sheet to explain to them how that over the past years that they have moved us from a position where that we had other ways of funding government to relying more and more on property tax every year. And that's what's driving the big concern. So I think if we give them an education on why that it's moved from other ways of funding government to property tax, and that's what's driving the concern, I think we can make a lot more money trying to negotiate and be polite and tell them where we're at and why we're doing it that way.
I'll be nice. I promise I will be nice. I don't want to be. Inside, I'm raging. Did anybody else watch the LAVTR hearings yesterday? Was it yesterday? I think it was. So once again, if they really want to get property taxes down, they actually have the tools to do it. There is a way to get them down. They're sitting on over $2 billion, even at the end of this fiscal year. What's in the budget this year? They're sitting over about $2.5 billion. They can get the numbers down right now. They just have to understand. And I'll support them lowering the 20 mils. That, to the end of the day, that taxpayers will see a reduction in their, and they don't know where the money's been cut. They're not paying attention. So if they cut the 20 mils, great. I'll support that too. But at the end of the day, if they want to get property taxes down, there truly is a way to get them down. But this is exactly the wrong thing to do. This is exactly backwards.
And if you wouldn't mind, I would add in, I think it's really important that we educate our legislators. I also think it's really important that we're educating our community on exactly what you just talked about, on how much more we are reliant upon property tax dollars because of changes that have happened at the state. And I think that's also a piece that while we're doing this, we need to be reaching out so people can understand that a little bit better. And then maybe they can also be helpful in saying that there should be a better solution here than this, because this is clearly not the best path forward to accomplish that goal.
Well, we will get a written testimony crafted for you to all begin to look at and add and amend, and we will schedule a trip up. If whoever can make it physically, great, and if not, we'll arrange.
Very good. I would also say one other thing, and that is if this does come to fruition and, it comes to a vote of the people, how that is worded. And you know as well as I do, when these things are worded for constitutional amendments and people are going to vote on them, they love to really mess up the language. And I think Commissioner Lopez is right. Education is important here, and we're going to have to do our due diligence so people understand. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
If this gets on the ballot, there's no way it's going to fail because no one's going to vote against trying to reduce their property tax, even if they're not educated enough to know what the total impact is going to be.
Tanya, other legislative issues?
We're just
Just warming up, huh?
Truly, there's probably about 10 items we need to talk about. Okay, the next item that I'm passing out is Senate Bill 468. So there is no hearing on this coming up. And so this is more or less just an FYI. So this bill is, and Kelly knows about this, and he's here with us now. This bill is limiting cities and counties to stay at the revenue neutral rate if granting exceptions. So they amended this bill to remove the tax increment financing from cities and county levies that would require the city or county to not exceed the revenue neutral rate. And I've talked about this before. And so it's just more or less a heads up right now. Jason continues to think this is not going to go anywhere. We had talked about this before, that this was going to get worked in the committee, and it has been worked in the committee. So again, there's no hearing on it. So it's just more or less an FYI to you all. So, okay. If nothing on that, I'm going to keep moving. Next one is Senate Bill 536. So this bill would require political subdivisions to adopt a budget that remains at or below the revenue neutral rate. To remain at or below the revenue neutral rate and use funds to reduce property tax in order to receive LAVTR distributions. So to me, this is a really interesting bill. And Jason pointed out he's not quite sure that this bill makes sense because there's no appropriation for LAVTR funding. And then as you will recall, I think I sent you a couple of weeks ago, a bill that abolishes LAVTR on the House side. So just again, more or less a heads up, but there is a hearing on that if we want to do anything as far as testimony next Wednesday.
Tanya,
Yes.
briefly, I'm getting several text messages from legislators and city managers from some of our 20 cities here in Sedgwick County asking how they can also participate in what we're doing on the bills, the potential constitutional amendment bills. So I don't know strategically if we should send an email out to our list to say, hey, this is what's going on. We can send our letter. I think the more support we can get from all the cities outside of just Sedgwick County, I think would be helpful, but because this impacts them dramatically as well.
Do we have a distribution list for SCAC, which
Oh, yeah,
has
sure.
all of the electeds and administrators? That would be the tool.
Why don't we do that? Because I think that they would certainly want to weigh in as well and provide letters of opposition.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, then let me jump back to Lindsay. Lindsay, did you want to speak on Senate Bill 311? Is that relevant right now or?
This is one that we got a notice about this morning on 311. You've already spoken about that. It's just, it's a bill that would allow, and Mark, I don't know that you're even necessarily fully aware of it, but I would be interested in his commentary, but essentially it would introduce dark store theory to be used on commercial property. And so there was a KAC legislative alert this morning that came out about this. And so that might be another one where we would want to do some deep diving because that could be horribly hurtful to our commercial property. So Mark, do you want to speak to dark store theory real quick? Are you aware of this bill? Okay, well, it's cooked. I'll give you my copy.
Are you saying dark store theory?
Yes.
Okay.
Welcome to the club.
While he's reviewing that, would someone want to bring the rest of 520,000 people in the county up to what dark store theory is? Does somebody?
Dark store theory, basically what you're doing is three appraisers will take an appraisal. They're going to an appraisal, a property, a commercial property, usually a big box store, but it doesn't have to be a big box. They've been moving in other directions too, and using vacant property, vacant sales to use as comps to appraise those properties. And basically it's cutting the values in half. If you go type in dark store in your search on the internet, you will pull up God knows how many articles where budgets have been slashed, especially in Iowa, Michigan, New York. And it's happening in upstate Kansas, where they have had to make dramatic changes in their budgets. And so when that sort of thing happens, that means that there's going to be massive refunds. And that means that services are going to be cut, people can be laid off, etc. And so it does massive damage. I will mention a name, and probably I shouldn't, but I will. I know her very well. She is a top attorney. She's known across the country, Linda Terrell. She lives in Kansas, and she is the queen of siding with property owners and getting massive reductions in value.
And when we talked about this a few years ago, it's clear that it's a shift of a tax burden away from big box commercial to everybody else,
Yes.
residential, et cetera. That was the other chapter of that story.
What's interesting is many of these big box, the retail side of it is the property owners not paying the property tax bill traditionally.
Right.
These are triple net leases to where the property tax burden is paid by the retailer
Correct.
or the tenant. It's not, so there's a big shift happening in who would be responsible for the property taxes, not just the value.
In Kansas, it was like 6 or 7 years ago, there was I think a Supreme Court decision here that caused this to be basically a thing here in Kansas. I don't think it was statutorial. It was more a court decision that was made, I believe, that put us into this discussion. Am I right about that?
Commissioner Al, I may defer some to Tom Henry in our office or Mark if they want to opine on the thing. They're more knowledgeable than I am about dark store theory case law.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't think we've actually dealt with it legislatively. I think this is a consequence of a court case. here
I
in
believe
Kansas.
that's correct.
We've danced around it, but we haven't really taken it on.
Thank you.
But wasn't Sedgwick County involved in that law case?
Yes. Yes, we were. It was the target case.
Government. This is just incredible to me how we we just get in the way of everything. It's just absolutely crazy. Carry on.
Okay. Mark, are you done?
So is dark store coming back? Is there a
It-
bill working through right now that we got?
Well, I will read the italicized portion here. The sale price or value at which property sells or transfers ownership in a federal Internal Revenue Code Section 1031 exchange, a bill to suit transaction, or a sale leaseback arrangement shall not be considered an indicator of fair market value, nor as a factor in arriving at fair market value. Federal Internal Revenue Code Section 1031 exchange, bill to suit, and sale leaseback arrangement transactions shall not be used as comparable sales for valuation purposes or valid sales for purposes of sales ratio studies. And this one here, I now know what you're talking about, Senate Bill 311. That, I'll be honest with you, Lindsay, that doesn't give me heartburn. It really doesn't. I mean, because it's these kinds of sales right here that have caused us to be out of compliance. And it's also these types of sales in doing research, and when you're doing a sales ratio study, things that sales you want to appeal. We have several companies here, real estate companies. They sell property, of course, but they won't sell to anybody in Kansas. They may sell to somebody outside of Kansas if their net income is enough or net worth, or they will usually sell to a foreign entity or a foreign person who has the money. And when we're trying to value those properties and looking at what they pay for, we can't even get close. So the ratios are so out of whack, it's crazy. But this has been discussed by county appraisers, most of which this doesn't create heartburn for.
Thank you.
But thank you.
Okay, so this bill is being considered today by the Senate. So if we want to do anything on this, they're just, KAC is recommending that we contact our senators as soon as possible.
Okay.
Okay, next item, I'm going to hand over to Justin, and this is related to the sheriff.
Thank you, Tanya. Commissioners, I left at each of your seats. I apologize, Commissioner Lopez, I wasn't able to convey it to you, but it's House Bill number 2835. This is just for your awareness at this point. This bill would place a duty on all counties that have cities of the first class, that would include Sedgwick County, to adopt a resolution that would establish an official policy regarding law enforcement vehicle pursuit protocols. Sheriff Easter had reached out some on this. It's a little bit of an awkward bill for a few standpoints. First, And the sheriff's office has a policy on this, an adequate policy that's meant to protect safety and ensure that, I think really some of the aims probably that are in this bill are already encapsulated in the sheriff's policy. It's also kind of potentially puts boards of county commissioners in the crosshairs on litigation in these matters, where traditionally it's sheriff's offices, the sheriff and the individual officers who are usually the defendants in the suits. Sheriff Easter indicated that, if this goes to hearing right now, there's not a hearing set, but that the Kansas Sheriff's Association would be testifying against it. So at this point, just making you aware of it. I mean, if you have questions or if there's a position the board wants to take, I'm happy to talk about it.
Sheriff, I see you're on. If you're available, I'm not sure if you're open to comment or not, but if you'd like to add any color context to this, we'd love to hear it.
Well, good morning. Yes, it's a bill that just kind of came out of nowhere. Again, talking to our lobbyist, Ed Klump, he's not sure at all that it will get a hearing. It's coming from a representative up in the Overland Park area. I think it's problematic on two aspects of it. The first one is, as Justin eloquently said, it puts you guys right in the crosshair. Most of the time, when you guys get named in a lawsuit from a sheriff's office event, most of the time what I've seen is that you guys are dropped off that lawsuit. We're kept on because I'm an independent elected official that controls policy. And I think this would put you right in the crosshairs that you would have to be part of that lawsuit. Secondly, I don't throw this out there too often, but I'm an independent elected official to run the sheriff's office. And I don't agree with other elected officials running our policy, because then where does this end? At a point where they then start moving forward other legislation for commissioners or city council members, because it applies to the police department as well, running the sheriff's office. And there's a distinction here.
Yeah. Well, Sheriff, it sounds like you have a lobbyist that's informing you of kind of what the traction is. If you feel like we should opine maybe with testimony, written testimony, please let us know. And I think we can have a separate discussion if we need to assist with that.
I appreciate that, sir.
Doesn't this also go back to the Supreme Court case here in Kansas, where the sheriff sued the Board of County Commissioners on the funding? Doesn't it kind of fall in the same category? Is it in that case why they said we couldn't, the Board of County Commissioners had to support the sheriff, and in this case we're overruling the sheriff?
I think I can touch on some of the same issues. If Sheriff Easter wants to opine on that, it's a different context here. And like Sheriff was noting, he's got some authority to adopt policies, and there is case law on that at the Kansas Supreme Court, but also he has a policy addressing this in an adequate way. So, I'm not sure is the need. I didn't mention this earlier, but this arguably, even if this passed, we could charter out of it because it's non-uniform. But I mean, I still think it's not the best piece of legislation as far as the county's concerned.
Okay. Good input. Tanya?
Okay, got 4 more updates. Okay, Adrian provided me with these updates just this morning. So House Bill 2754, this is authorizing counties to use home rule powers to exempt from conducting school sanitary inspections. So this has a hearing next Tuesday in Senate Public Health and Welfare. If you recall, I think we provided written testimony on the House side for this, and Jason provided oral testimony. So if you approve, I think what we do is we just provide that same written testimony on to the Senate, and we can ask Jason if he would provide oral testimony. Okay. Okay. Next one is House Bill 2601. So this is requiring individuals convicted of the third or subsequent DUI to participate in a multidisciplinary model of services for substance use disorders. This has a hearing next Wednesday at 10:30 in Senate Judiciary. I think we did the same, if I'm not mistaken. We provided written testimony on this, and I think we could, if you're okay with that, we would do the same.
Okay. What's that bill number again?
House Bill 2601.
Thank you.
That's on our legislative agenda.
It is
Yes,
correct.
yes.
Yes. Okay, Senate Bill 500, this is the driver's license bill. I think, if I'm not mistaken, has the exemptions to take your children to daycare and so forth. Okay, so this is scheduled for final action in Senate this afternoon. And then Senate Bill 542. This is, I'm sorry, making 40 million in appropriations for KDADs and creating program for cities and counties to develop infrastructure for homeless shelters. So there's no action currently scheduled, but assigned to Senate Ways and Means on March 12th. So this looks similar, and just, I don't know if I'm going to get this right. I'm going to say House Bill 2723.
That's correct.
Okay. So it looks exactly the same as House Bill 20.
It is, yeah, it looks to be.
So that is all I have this meeting.
Okay, well, nothing going on with the legislature. Huh? Tom, you want to step us through the rest of the agenda, or do you want to add any more? Does it need to have any follow-up conversations on the legislative piece? Or?
I think that's. You were done.
I'm done.
Your mic.
That's it, sir.
That's it. Okay, want to step through the agendas?
Nicole, okay, agenda for, let me get the papers moved around here. For March 20, county announcements, Tony, or I'm sorry, Nicole.
Good morning. February is Women's History Month, so we will have a wrap-up video for that. The election office is still running their I Voted sticker design contest through March 29th. So we'll have a little information on it. For County Good News, we will have 2 folks in that have received Wichita Business Journal awards. One for the 2024 Healthcare Hero, and the other is a young professional in technology. And then quick reminder, the presidential preference primary election is Tuesday, March 19th. Polls are open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. And a reminder, if you are in line at 7 p.m. when the poll closed, stay in line.
Very good.
Okay, we have a single proclamation for Development and Disability Awareness Month. Then we have 2 appointments, Dr. Berger being reappointed to a corrections board, and Commissioner Dennis is appointing a board member for the 911, the newly formed 911
That's good.
Emergency Communication Board. Under new business, E and F are both benefit district resolutions. One is in District 5, the other is in District 1. Item E had 100% support from the community being impacted, and item F had above 50%, which moves it forward. So Garth will be here to present those. Chris Labram on item G is going to come and just set the public agenda for, what are we doing? Electric code. They or not, if you have questions, Chris is here to answer questions. Item H is an evolving issue regarding RHID, reinvestment housing incentive districts in Sedgwick County. We will staff this on Tuesday as well, so you'll have some public discussion.
Are we going to be adopting policy on, or are we just discussing publicly?
On Tuesday at staff, we will just be discussing publicly. We'd like an adoption of a policy on Wednesday if the commission is comfortable.
Okay, all right.
And then Board of Bids and Contracts is item A. Under consent, J and K are public works issues. One is a right of easement for the work we're doing at 53rd and 135th, moving north up to the railroad tracks. That's just a property easement. I don't think there's a fiscal note on that. I'm sorry, there is a fiscal note. It's just short of 19,000 fiscal note on J.
There's no condemnation.
Negative.
It's all taken care of.
Yes. Lynn, where are you? Yeah. K is a vacation request on a private driveway, and that description is on page 80 of your backup material out in District 3. L, M, and N are all health department items. I'm probably going to have Tim give me an assist at least on item N. L is a consideration of a grant, what's called a aid to local grant. We get this every year. It's a $3 million and $15,000 grant, of which $397,000, that is a match from the county. So the total grant is a little bit over 3 million. That represents, that grant is annual, as I said, it's up this year, represents 18% of the operational dollars for local health department. M is a request for additional budget authority and Healthy Start grant. That is, we received, let me go backwards. In November of 2018, the commission approved a 5-year grant, this 5-year grant. On March 10th of this year, we got a notification of a carryover award of $250,000, which is what we need the budget authority to actually spend. So that's the ask here. And let me cover N, and then we can come back with any questions to Tim. And then N is a request for budget authority in the amount of $570,000 for transfer from contractuals to personnel to cover expenses incurred by COVID-19. It's my understanding that is a transfer, and I'll let Lindsay weigh in on this too.
Yes, right. So we're transferring budget within the health department grant fund because we're able to use those dollars now for expenses that were otherwise paid by ARPA. So this is going to allow us to move those expenses out of ARPA, thereby freeing up cash there, and we can draw down this grant. So kind of a win-win, I think, for everybody.
Stop there for a pause for L, M, and N. Now questions.
Questions? Thing you need to add, Tim? That's wisdom.
Item O is a public works item. It's a capital improvement amendment for a traffic signal replacement at 47th and Oliver, District 5. The total fiscal note on that amendment, I believe, is just a little bit under 84,000. Item P, you've all been briefed about it, and Rusty is here if there's any questions. This is the discussion, the CIP amendment for the juvenile detention facility camera system. There were questions when we did one-on-ones with you about body cams and or the use of recording devices. Rusty, in between now and when you vote on this, will get you a comprehensive document of why those do not work in this system and why it has to be this. Unless you want to talk about it today. I thought we just produced something publicly. So.
But this was,
I don't understand it costs that much for ceiling tiles.
Or Tanya go, or Dilts. If I have the right staff in to ask that question.
And I don't understand how the ceiling tiles is going to solve all of the issues with sound.
Want to go?
Dilts is probably the better because he's worked with the architects and the engineers on this, but the acoustics in the building, if you apply the audio capability to the cameras as they are placed, the acoustics in the building simply wash out the sound. If it's garbled, nothing. They're indicating that alterations to the existing tiles in a lot of portions of the building where they've been painted over has diminished the acoustic characteristics of the original tiles. And then they also, I believe, are adding they're redoing all the ceilings with acoustic tile to absorb sound, to make the audio legible and usable. And I think there's some other, I don't know if they're doing some padding on some walls and additional stuff like that. All of the tear out and all of the replacement and all the labor is what comes to that approximate $500,000 increase. And I think that also includes a small portion of contingent goes into every one of our projects.
And
So
have we bid this and this is the price we're getting, or is this our estimate?
Estimate
An
from
estimate.
miscellaneous.
I don't understand these little tiles. It takes a second to push it up and pull it out. And you're talking about over $1 a square foot to do that. I don't understand how we come up with estimates that high.
It did come from an architect. We have vetted it, also some wiring, some other things that are going to happen in order to add in these cameras and the audio in a way that we're gonna be able to keep it within the facility because it is juveniles. And then also because we're going to have to add storage and some of those other things. And so it's comprehensive for the entire project and all of the additions. The bulk of the cost is the tile, but there are some incidental costs as well, just to make sure that it's supported properly. And the good news is we have enough in our CIP reserve that we can allocate funds from that reserve and not have to impact the general fund for this.
But
cost.
once we spend over $500,000 and it doesn't work, then where are we at?
I think the idea of a phased-in approach is going to happen, right, Rusty?
That's correct. When we talked about it, we thought about doing a room and testing it before we move through with the rest of the projects. We phased the actual project and
What did you say a moment ago about, because this is juveniles, what was the first part of that comment?
You can't share cameras, you can't share audio back out. It all needs to be secured.
So why can't we have, go ahead.
Mario Salinas, Deputy Director for Juvenile. I just wanted to weigh in that some of those costs include adding cameras to the JIAC holding rooms. That was part of the Community Task Force recommendation. And those cameras would also have audio as well as adding audio to the JIAC intake area. So some of those things also pertain to the CIP. And the amendment itself, which is my understanding from facilities today, is that this is for you guys to approve us the budget authority to go out for RFP. Because right now the proposal in front of you with that amount was used for our in-house architect who worked with the sound engineer we hired previously to come up with those numbers. So if we go out for RFP, we would have vendors that would have to come before bid board and the BOCC if we move forward. Is that correct, Lindsay?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And can you speak to that, those special rules that apply to juvenile offenders and why their system's kind of on a loop internally and
Yes.
be shared out?
So we have a closed system, which was previously called Comtech. It's now Cornerstones. But essentially, if there was ever like a network hack or something like that, like a cyber attack, our systems are all offline. They wouldn't be able to have access to it. So our systems would still be up and running and isn't accessible to any outside entities, which is why we haven't gone to like the courthouse camera systems and whatnot. It was all built into the juvenile detention facility back in 2006 to be a closed network.
I would just add that it was a CIP to add audio prior to the community task force. The community task force was a secondary recommendation. The original recommendation was born out of an audit by a PREA audit, Prison Rape Elimination Act audit that was done on the facility. And the recommendation was best practices to have audio in those areas where clients are going to be, whether it's clients together without an adult in close proximity, or whether it's a client talking to an employee with nobody else around. By having that audio, you protect the kids from kids, you protect kids from adults, you protect adults from kids. Allegations of misconduct, sexual harassment, those types of things. Out of the task force grew, in addition to that recommendation, which was from our district attorney in writing saying, if an incident happens where there's use of force, where there's violence between clients, it is helpful for investigative purposes and to get to the bottom, to get to the true facts by having audio capabilities that capture what's being said, both by any combatants or anybody who's involved, to be able to hear what's said, what transpires ahead of time, what transpires through the incident, and what happens afterwards. And so those two combined, trying to meet a standard recommended by PREA and trying to meet a standard recommended by the district attorney, to add audio throughout this facility is what we're trying to accomplish. So it's twofold. It's not just born of the task force alone. We had a recommendation from PREA prior that was in CIP for the same type of activity. And before we spent taxpayer money, before we spent $250,000, $220,000, $240,000 to add a few cameras and to add audio. All these cameras are audio capable. We added that. We wanted to make sure that it was going to be audio that would be legible and understandable and not be disappointing and a waste of money. And that's why they employed the use of a sound engineer. And we've gone through this process to ensure that when we meet the standards of PREA and when we meet the expectations of the community recommended by the district attorney, that it provides the accountability that was expected.
Okay. Andrew is also on. Andrew Dilts, you're on if you want to add anything. Sorry, I didn't see you on. Thank you, Mario, for your comments too. It's helpful.
Yes, and I apologize. I'm driving, so hopefully everyone can hear me. The scope of work right now is our plan of attack anyway, is to install audio recording within the facility. And then based on the engineer's evaluation, there's concern on how intelligible the audio will be if we do not make any acoustical environment changes. So after the audio is installed, our plan is to evaluate how intelligible the audio recordings are on a case-by-case basis or a room-by-room basis, and if necessary, make the recommendations that the engineer has provided to replace the ceiling tiles, for example, to allow for the audio recording to be intelligible or understandable.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of things. So even with these improvements in the building, there's still going to be blind spots by design. I look at the drawing that you provided in our briefing, and there's areas that are not going to be covered by cameras, and therefore not going to be covered by audio. So what about that?
Mario, do you want to speak to that?
So any area that's on the map would be those locations where youth would be located. Any place that youth are not allowed access would not have the audio video capabilities, and youth would not be in those parts of the building. So we make sure from intake to detention, they would have 24/7 surveillance in the common areas outside of their rooms, because we can't put cameras in their rooms.
So in their rooms, they're not going to be cameras.
Correct.
Does staff ever go inside the rooms?
Not by themselves. They would have somebody else with them if they were having to do like a room entry or something like that. So there would not be a staff and a resident in a room by itself. No. And per the PREA standards that we cannot put cameras in rooms in living areas where they have a common expectation of privacy.
So they have privacy in their rooms, and there's no cameras or audio in those rooms, and staff could go in there. And what happens in that room is not going to be captured by any of this technology, right?
For our policy, the staff cannot go in their rooms by themselves.
I understand that, but again, sometimes people break the rules, and also even if they go in there unimpaired, doesn't mean that something couldn't happen in that room and it's not captured by anybody. I guess I don't understand why the body cams is still not a good idea. You talk about protecting the video and audio. I get that. This will not be just put out on the World Wide Web or something. It's going to be protected, and it will be redacted if necessary. If someone requests it, it'll have some type of filter to make sure we comply with privacy or, juvenile special rules. So why do body cams not work?
So I would say there's cameras that capture the area outside the individual cells and rooms that these kids are in. And Mario can correct me if I'm wrong. So if an employee approaches those, they can be seen approaching, and they could be seen going in by themselves, which is a violation, which will be dealt with. If there's an incident inside a kid's room where there's some type of altercation, that's when a supervisor has to respond. The supervisor is going to arrive with a body cam, and when they arrive, they're going to capture everything that transpires from the point. Body cameras per employee right now we have, it's my understanding, and again, Mario can, we have 9 body cameras on supervisors, and we have 11 body cameras in corrections transport vehicles, so that whenever they transport you, they have an axon system in those vehicles to capture what happens in that vehicle. In order to place body cams on every corrections officer would add 70 additional cameras plus the cost of evidence.com storage. It's going to increase your annual cost and your ongoing costs we estimate, we don't have a firm quote, but I'm estimating that's going to be somewhere between $175,000 to $200,000 per year, continuous forever. Currently, we've looked at the sheriff, Mario. The sheriff has axons on his supervisors, but not on every correction officer. So Mario, if you want to speak to it more than that.
Yeah, I would just agree with that. This would be a one-time capital improvement project. Whereas if you were to put body cameras on all staff, they don't have the capabilities to run 24/7. And the storage alone would just be a huge cost to the county versus the one-time capital improvement.
And part of the goal of the audio, of the overall audio, is to catch interaction and conflict between kids where staff not present. Body cam would not capture that, and that was part of what the audit was concerned with too, was interactions between clients, and the system would catch it.
Right.
Is that considered they have no expectation of privacy when they're talking to someone outside their room? Just another person in the building, they can't?
Not in public.
Okay, so curiously, why are we doing this on this juvenile facility, but not doing it in other areas of corrections? Why just here? Inconsistency. Why are we doing it just on one thing?
Mario?
Well, we currently have cameras at the juvenile residential facility that do have audio and video. So this was one of those recommendations to add that per the PREA annual report and the PREA audit, which is what we had approved in the original CIP, to add the audio to the existing cameras. And then out of the task force, it was identified that we would need to check the facility to see if that audio would be intelligible, and then to also add more cameras based on those recommendations for transparency.
Why not adult? I think is the question, Mario. Why not adult residential, and why not jail? I mean, I think that's Commissioner Al, that's the point to your question, right?
That's part of my question. I have a follow-up question after that, but go ahead.
From my perspective, I think it branches off to the community task force recommendations on us going through those items to address and making sure that we're as transparent as possible. And for juvenile, we have a lot of use of force and critical incidents that we respond to on a regular basis. That's not so much the case for our adult residential facility.
PREA was geared toward the audit of the juvenile facilities and not the adult residential facility where those folks can walk out if they want to. There's not the type of use of force issues there. And then at the jail, the sheriff just underwent renovations to the camera system. You'd have to talk to him about whether he believes there's any value in adding audio to his entire system.
I can speak to the sheriff because that question, I did ask that question a few months ago, and the sheriff has no desire to have audio recording at the jail. And if he ever was, and I can't speak to why he does not, but I know he does not have that desire to have audio. And in a facility like that, it is very, it would be very difficult to ever add audio to that facility based on its current construction.
I guess my final question would be this: is this justified? I mean, what problem are we solving here? How much money is this expenditure?
The addition of cameras and audio, I believe, Andrew, is about $240,000, and that's what's been in CIP. The additional cost for this project is estimated what it would cost to do the audio corrections, the acoustic corrections throughout the building. And again, Andrew indicated that there's some intent to do that on a case-by-case basis once they determine where the problem areas truly are. Based on their audit, they believe that they gave us those areas they thought are going to be problematic. I think the value to doing this is the problem we're trying to solve is it's not uncommon for allegations to be made in that facility that corrections has to investigate, whether it's kids against kids saying and behaving inappropriately. And once in a while, it's a kid making an allegation about an adult in the building. And whenever they go to investigate that, if they haven't, they can see them on the camera talking to each other, but they have no audio. And again, body worn cameras, you can't have them on throughout an entire shift and expect the battery life to last. And so this is addressing investigational, the ability to improve investigational techniques whenever it comes to PREA issues, as well as use of force issues. You've got audio on 24/7, 365, recorded and retained throughout the period that it's not going to override until 30 or 45 days later. If an investigation has to be done, we have all that evidence as recommended by PREA and recommended by the district attorney. And use of force happens routinely, and allegations, PREA-related allegations happen periodically. And this is just a best practice to protect everybody involved.
Are there other juvenile facilities, outside of Sedgwick County that are doing this technology?
Mario?
Yes, part of when we met with, when we contracted with the sound engineer out of Kansas City, is that Steve reviewed camera audio from other facilities throughout Kansas. And those that did not have that infrastructure in place, all the audio was pretty much useless, versus those that were built to suit that type of technology. It was like watching a movie from his perspective. So if we were just to throw audio in on the cameras, again, that would just be adding.
Let me restate my question.
We have audio from other facilities in Kansas. Do you remember which juvenile facilities Steve got that from, Mario?
I'm sorry, I do not.
So we have those snippets because Steve took those to the district attorney, to Mark Bennett, and they sat down and listened to those together so Mark could understand the complexities. And I think Steve shared them with some other folks. We have those snippets if you want to hear them and what facilities they came from in Kansas. There are other facilities in Kansas, juvenile facilities, that have audio installed. Some are pretty much worthless because their facility was not designed and they took no action to change the acoustics. And then some were designed and built with the audio in mind. And like Mario said, it's like watching a movie. You can see what's happening and you can hear very clearly what's being said.
I trust you guys on that. So is this going to be impacted by the $22 million CIP for campus improvement? Okay, no. And what's the life cycle of this equipment? We have it as 10 years, we have to replace it, or?
Andrew, are you still on? Can you speak to the life cycle of the equipment that we're purchasing?
I don't think the audio devices themselves have a life expectancy. It's going to be the hard drives that everything gets stored on, which are going to be the same as the video hard drives that we currently have. So all of that, those hard drives have to be replaced periodically, and I'd have to go back and verify, but I think those hard drives are somewhere around 10 years, worst case scenario, 5 years. But I think it's closer to the 10-year mark.
Lindsay, when we did the sheriff's plan, did we not, we asked the same question on sheriff's cameras, but life expectancy, do we have a number on that, on the video component?
I don't know yes, on the video component, the cameras are expected to last 7 to 10 years, but for specifically the audio, I don't know if that changes.
Mario, I'm going to throw out some numbers here because I recall there was a CIP in 2018 where we upgraded the camera system at JDF and probably JIAC. And then in 2022, I believe we upgraded the DVR system at JDF and increased the number of DVRs so that we had greater retention and storage capacity. And then we'll replace a few cameras that'll be newer. So we're still about 5 years. The replacement from 2018, 2019 would be 4 to 5 year old equipment. Does that sound right, Mario?
Yes, it sounds correct.
I'll make a final comment and I'll stop talking on this one. I think this is being politically pressured. I don't know if this is something we would have done at this time, or being, I think, pressured into doing this because we're reacting, I think, to those recommendations. But we didn't do this on our own. This is not something we've had corrections in Sedgwick County for, I mean, how long? What, decades? And suddenly now this is a new requirement. I want to stop spending money. And there's $250,000 we don't have to spend. It's a choice to spend money. It might be a good idea. In some cases, it might solve some confusion, to investigate a case. But this is $250,000 we don't have to spend, and it's not just one time. It's going to be another $250,000 down the road. when you have to replace some stuff. And by the way, the system, you're not really upgrading that system yet. There's a ton of other cameras and video servers that are part of the system that have a life as well. So there's a tremendous amount of cost for this technology. And at the end of the day, we don't have to do this. It's just, I guess my final comment will be, you really want this on consent? I'm not sure it belongs on consent.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with any of that. And we started this conversation today by cost of government, what continues to go up. Policies created when things happen. And you try to get better because what you don't want to ever sit in the chair and do is say, gosh, we knew that was a problem. We didn't do anything about it. And you don't want to repeat a mistake over and over. That's the whole impetus of this. There is an audit that predated the Sedgwick's case down there. The DA has weighed in on what he thinks is best practice. That does put some pressure on us because if it happens again and we don't have this in place, I think then it becomes culpability and liability for the county. So your point is well taken. Many times what we do in the county is a result of pressure from courts, from judges, from the community, and it costs money. And I think that's our reaction and why we think we should go forward with this. It's up to the commission. And as I hear the process on this, you'll get another bite at this apple because this is simply just a CIP amendment. It's going to come back around again to you publicly on a bid board item that Joe will present. And I mean, we've gotten into a lot of weeds here. I was going to have Rusty craft this into a document. I don't think you have to do that anymore, Rusty, because we've talked a lot here. But we can also do a more formal presentation during that time publicly for if it would be beneficial. Okay. Oh, where were we? Okay, item Q. Now this is the senior center funding coming back again on.
We're on a roll today, aren't we, Tom?
I'm going to try to squelch this one. So we have to, the commission voted in a budget last August to fund these senior centers. And we've got some of them now calling, and Tim can validate this, wondering where their money's at. All we want to do right now with this item is pay them what the commission agreed to pay them last August, understanding that there's many questions about senior center funding. We're bringing it back to a full staff from ground up to top on senior center funding on April the 16th. We're going to workshop this. And if you want to push more money into that or take money away or change it in the future, we can do it based on what you tell us in that staff meeting. If depending on what action you're going to take, we may have to push it over to a meeting to vote on it. But on the staff meeting on the 16th, we'll vet this thoroughly. All this item wants to do is pay them what the commission said we were going to pay them.
The baseline.
Okay.
I just want to be clear that on the 2024 budget, I voted for the entire budget. I was not happy that this was in here. Next, for the 2025 budget, if we're still unequal and unfair on senior centers, I'll have to vote against the entire budget. I have some serious problems with the way we're funding them. So, and I will pull Q off and vote against it.
Okay. Understood, sir. And we understand that on the 16th, this is where we beginning to get into this discussion of what the 25 budget is going to look like. Absolutely. Okay. Item R is a request to transfer a portion of a position. This is when we consolidated CDDO and aging. This is part of the cleanup of how we fund certain positions. That is the request, and Tim can talk to this a little bit more about the funding component of that. And then item S, you've got an email from Joan on a hiring issue with a doctor, and the rest of this is routine business. There's a fire agenda, which you've also been vetted by the chief, and Brad are both here on the implementation of a K-9. Is that correct, Rusty? That's what this item is.
Yeah, this would be the agreement with ATF, so that if ATF wanted to call, this is an ATF dog. If ATF had a case locally and they wanted to utilize that dog, they would request that they respond, and then they would in turn reimburse the time and expenses of that body and the use of that dog for that call out. And that's what this agreement does. It says, if we call, you'll come, but we'll reimburse you. And it's similar to what the agreement that we have with the state fire marshal for hazmat. And Chief and Brad are here to.
I think we did 221s on this topic.
221s. I think they covered it, but they're here. If you got another question.
That's it. No questions of mine. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? Anything else from? I saw that Kelly was here earlier. I don't know if Brandy or was here. Angela was here. Yeah. Anything else needs to be added or discussed? Well, that was busy. Okay. Have a good weekend.
All right.
See you guys next week.
We'll get your testimony on this, see you to look at. I think that's.